to a standstill by a mess of protruding legs and arms. All at once, the boy and the girl at the front tumbled off, and the remaining rider shot down the rest of the way, whooping with terror, until she went headfirst into a drift at the bottom. The other boys had been wrestling with less enthusiasm. They now broke off and began laughing enviously at the biggest boy, who was lying on top of the girl halfway down the slope. Deirdre Pollard, Katie Thorn, the Allen brothers. Emily curled her lip and turned away. She would sled on her own. Deirdre and Katie were stupid, and the Allens had a bad reputation. Only the youngest, Simon, was still at school. The others hung about the village, aggressively doing nothing. Martin Allen, the eldest, had been the most aggressive of all, but he hadn't been seen for a while. Emily had heard he was in prison. When she had got a good way from the group, she stopped, positioned her sled on the top of the slope, and sat. Below her was a steep chute of white treachery, all its rocks and holes cloaked from sight. Emily paused, clenched her teeth, and pushed off. A spray of sleet, a funnel of cold air, a juddering whirl of whiteness. Then she was levelling out and coming to rest against the bottom of the opposite slope, her body jerking forward, her outstretched boots scrunching into the snow. Stand still. It had taken all of 3 seconds. Emily sat there, catching her breath, grinning with the adrenaline. Then something hit her in the face. It snapped her head to one side, ripping out a gasp as the thin, cold pain tore across her cheek. The suddenness confused her. She knew it was a snowball, but it felt like the blow of a fist. Loud laughter. Something else whistled in front of her face. Another missile hit her leg, shattering snow shards into her eyes. Emily struggled to her feet, tripping over the sled cord, half blinded with tears from the impact. As if through wet glass, she saw her attackers a little way off along the bottom of the moat. Snowballs scudded through the air. A couple struck her chest and stomach. She bent for the cord, turned, and started to stumble away through the drifts. She skidded, almost fell, righted herself. Then there was a tremendous clout on the back of her head. Her hat fell off in a shower of ice particles, and she knew she was about to cry. She ran on, leaving the hat behind. It was impossible to go fast. The snow was too deep. But slowly the fusillade thinned, and the jeers grew fainter. Another missile hit her on the leg. Another shot past her ear. Then the attack ceased. Emily continued along the bottom of the moat, crying a little with misery and rage. At last she risked a look behind her, and saw that the curve of the slope had carried her out of view. She slowed to a trudge. On either side, the slope was too steep to climb, but she knew if she continued, she would come to the place where steps, cut in the grass, led up to the bridge. Then she could make her way back to the hedge and go home. A fragment of the outer wall rose from the snow at the top of the right-hand bank. Emily wished she could push it down on the fools who had attacked her. She had stopped crying now, and was kicking the snow savagely with every step. Katie Thorn, Deirdre Pollard, she'd get back at them, see if she wouldn't. But there was nothing she could ever do about the boys. They were just too big, even that gormless Simon. She hated them. She hated the whole village. Everyone there was stupid and brainless, and she was always left on her own with nothing to do. Sledding was the only possible way to stave off the Christmas boredom, and now she was getting beaten up for doing it. She couldn't go anywhere else either. For 20 miles in all directions the land was flat, an endless, boring tablecloth of grey-white fields scored with ice-choked ditches, runs, and rivulets. Mud and water everywhere, and not a slope in sight. The castle moat was the only place to take your sled, and now she was being driven away from it, back to her dull house, her dull parents. She was so caught up in her fury and despair that she failed to see the figure before she was almost upon him. A sudden movement made her look up. A boy she did not know was standing ahead of her at the bottom of the moat. He looked a little older than she, 15 or so, thin, with a mop of black hair protruding from all sides of a dark blue bobble hat. A blue anorak protected him from the cold, but he also wore trainers, which Emily knew must be soaked right through, and he had no gloves. He was scraping up snowballs, compacting them hard with his bare hands, and throwing them up at the ruined wall on the top of the rise. Each ball hit against the stonework, or vanished with a slight sound into the snow at its base. There was no one standing on the wall that Emily could see. The boy was alone. Emily stood watching him. He made no sign that he had seen her, but stooped to gather up another handful of snow. He threw it as hard as he could, then made a little noise of disapproval as it spattered into the top of the slope. His hands were red with cold. "You're trying to get them over the top?" Emily asked. The boy did not turn to look at her. "Yes." "It's very high." "I've done it once, but my arms are getting tired now." "Why don't you stop, then?" The boy didn't answer, but packed another snowball between his freezing fingers and threw. It plopped half-heartedly midway up the slope. "I'd stop if I were you," Emily said. "What I need is a siege engine," declared the boy, brushing his hands on his front and stuffing them into his coat pockets. "You know, a massive catapult. I could do it from miles off, then." "Do what?" "Chuck rocks onto the defenders, or burning lumps of pitch to set the place on fire. That would be the best way of doing it." Emily looked at the boy. He had a longish, serious face with pale skin and dark eyes that flicked rapidly back and forth between her and the wall above. "I thought castles were made of stone," she pointed out helpfully. "Fire wouldn't do anything." "A lot of the outer buildings were wooden," the boy replied. "But yeah, you're right. Fire wouldn't do much apart from fry a few defenders. Of course," he went on, "the other option would be heads." "Heads?" "Of the enemy. Soldiers killed in forays or local villagers. We chop off their heads and lob them back over the wall so that they rain down on their families and friends. Psychological warfare." "I'd stick to snowballs," Emily said. There was a silence. "You from round here, then?" the boy asked, finally. "From the village. You?" "I cycled from King's Lynn. Only took me half an hour." "Where's your bike, then?" "I left it in the dip by the edge." "Oh." This seemed to have exhausted the conversation. Emily could see the steps leading out of the moat up ahead. She started off. "Don't you like castles?" the boy said suddenly. "Yes, but right now I'm cold. I need to move about." "They're the best. Each one's different. They had to keep changing their ideas, you see, because of all the military developments. This one's an early one, of course." "Is it?" Emily shifted from one foot to the other, but it seemed rude to walk off while the boy was waffling. "You could tell that 'cause of the keep. Later on they didn't bother with keeps. They were strong, but much too cramped. And if they had square corners, they were always getting undermined. You know, tunnelling." "This one hasn't been," Emily said, feeling a certain local pride. "I know. Look at these outer walls, though. Someone's blown them to pieces. Who did it?" He asked the question directly, expecting an answer. "No idea." "Oh." The boy said this in a disappointed way that slightly annoyed Emily. "Some of these armies had great siege engines," he went on. "But you don't always need to destroy the walls. You know the Mongols? They were besieging some Christian castle, in Turkey, I think. Couldn't get in. So do you know what they did?" "No." "They got some bodies of Mongol soldiers who died of plague. Black boils all over them. Waited till they were really festering, ready to pop." He paused for a second, as if hoping Emily would say something. She didn't. "Then they catapulted the bodies over the walls into the city." Pretty soon the defenders started to get